I'm about to start my first ever live bookmaking workshop here at my home. I'll show you a little bit of a behind the scene of what it looks like, all the space that I manage. Sorry, I'm looking if there's anybody waiting for me in front of the house, but not yet. Okay, so all this stuff is all tools for individual students. There'll be 5 students coming in. And since this is my first workshop, I want to keep it simple and small enough that I can manage without too much panicking. So, and this little one here will be really panicking, I'm sure, but that boy will be doing fine. I'm excited, and it's gonna be a very meaningful day today, I'm pretty sure. I will do more stories later. God, I am excited. I'm nervous. I am anxious. But I got this. I got this. Wish me luck.
I still remember working as a sales associate at a Lowest grocery store in Seattle back in 2019. Right next door was a workshop studio called The Works, where crafting classes were happening almost every day. One day, the store owner thought of collaborating with the studio by hosting a workshop. So she asked if anybody was interested in teaching. Everyone raised their hand except me. I didn't feel bad about it because I was being honest with myself. I had no interest in standing in front of a group, leading, teaching, or managing a crowd. I've always been an introvert who feels comfortable staying in a corner of a room, observing, following, rather than taking a lead. The idea of teaching a group felt like a lot of pressure. All the attention would be on me, and people would be relying on me to guide them to do something. I kept thinking about all the things that could go wrong, like what if I couldn't answer their questions or troubleshoot their problems. Even handling more than 2 people at a time felt overwhelming to me. My heart would race, I would stumble on my words, and the whole experience just felt stressful. So at that time, I never imagined that I would one day host a workshop and lead people to create anything. Fast forward to 2025, when I pivoted from being a freelance web developer to becoming a paper artist. In March of that year, I made my first sale of a handmade notebook at a craft market, and I was over the moon. But that moment didn't mean everything else would fall into place. My journey was messy, which I expected because paper crafting was completely new to me. I allowed myself to experiment and follow my curiosity, which meant trying a little bit of everything. I made handmade paper, watercolor paper, stickers, and coloring books. I carved stamps and experimented with block printing. I tried origami and even impulsively bought a gum machine with a plan to sell small products through it. I joined markets, some of which were not a good fit for my work, and I made little to no money at many of them. At one point, I even got scammed by a fake market host. I donated a lot of handmade products to events in exchange for exposure and to share my message about sustainability and low-waste art. I built my website, opened an online store, learned how to photograph my products, wrote product descriptions, and shared them online. But sales were still very minimal. There were moments when I questioned everything I was doing and lost sleep over whether any of it would work. Over time, I realized that many of these efforts were not sustainable. As a solo business owner running a handmade product business, there is only so much you can do. Making the products already takes a ton of time, And on top of that, there is marketing, content creation, operations, and everything else that comes with running a business that makes money. If I wanted to make this work, I needed to shift my approach. This might be the point where I started thinking more seriously about selling my process along with selling physical products, like digital downloads, online workshop, online mini classes. That's because it's more scalable and healthier for my well-being. Therefore, I tested out through sharing videos of my crafting process on social media and Pinterest and see what type of crafting gained the most attention. Papermaking content seemed to be the most popular type. The second one was bookmaking. In a practical sense though, bookmaking would beat papermaking because it is simpler to start, takes less time to create, and requires less space. Papermaking was pretty much the opposite. At that point, after months of unclear direction and very little income, I felt impatient to see some kind of result. So I decided to create my first digital product, a self-paced online workshop teaching people how to make a tiny hardcover book using scrap paper and thrifted fabric. I landed on this workshop topic because a hardcover book is such a classic look of a book, which seems to appeal to most people. And the idea of using existing materials speaks to my passion around sustainability, and it helps keep the cost of crafting low. Meanwhile, the design of the book is not too intimidating for beginners, nor too boring for crafty people. I kept the workshop as simple as possible. It was far from perfect. I filmed myself teaching the process, edited the video, and uploaded as a long video on YouTube. I combined it with a couple free resources and packaged it as a lead magnet or a package of free resources in order to collect email signups. Then I repurposed the content into shorter, easy to follow videos with more detailed captions. I packaged them as a paid workshop, including additional resources and a bonus ebook. I set a price at $29. I wrote the sales page, set up the payment system, and made sure everything worked. I launched it right before going on a Christmas vacation with my husband. And as expected, it was very quiet because I didn't spend time promoting it. Even so, it felt like a huge milestone. For the first time, I had taken my process, turned it into a digital product, and made it available for people to buy on my website. That experience alone gave me so much confidence, especially because I was able to move past my perfectionism and actually launch something. After the vacation, I started putting more effort into improving my marketing messages and promoting the workshop. I updated the sales page, created more content, and ran ads to see what worked. I emailed my subscribers, offered free access to some people in exchange for feedback, and continued to share my process and stories online. At the end of January, the 2 students who got free access to my workshop completed their tiny books and showed them to me. The books looked so good and very similar to mine. One student even shared detailed feedback with me. This showed me that my instructions were clear enough for someone else to follow successfully. What surprised me even more was that the student enjoyed the process so much that she went on to make 14 more books for her friends. 14. I was beyond happy. In February, I made my first sale of the workshop. I literally screamed. Someone saw the value in what I created through the sales page and paid money for it. As a person who speaks English as a second language, this was a big compliment. Writing a sales page goes beyond normal writing. You are not just telling stories, you are also guiding readers to take action. It's persuasive writing, a challenging craft on its own. In the following weeks, I made 7 more sales. Most of them came from paid ads rather than my existing audience on my social media or email list, but it still felt like a real, meaningful progress. While continuing to create content and improve my workshop based on my students' feedback, I started wondering if I could teach this in person. In-person group crafting felt more interactive and engaging, and I liked the thought of people crafting together in the same space where they could ask questions, get immediate help, and mingle. To test the idea, I practiced with my husband, and it went better than I expected. He successfully created a book following my guide and enjoyed it. He also gave me comments on where I could improve. Overall, this experiment gave me enough confidence to consider trying it with a small group of strangers. I still had anxiety and fear thinking about teaching multiple strangers in person, but somehow, guiding people to make a handmade book didn't sound as scary as I thought. Maybe because this was the work I created for myself out of passion, not the kind that got assigned to me by someone. Therefore, my heart was fully in it and open for more challenges. I planned to open for 5 students because my space at home was limited and I didn't want to panic too much. I started simple by posting in a local Facebook community group to see if anyone would be interested in making a handmade book just for fun. More than 15 people responded, which was encouraging. I followed up with them, shared some rough details, and collected their emails. Then I picked a date about a month out, set the price at $50 based on similar workshops in my area, created a payment page, and sent out the information. For the first week, there were no bookings, even though most people opened the email. It was a bit discouraging, but I reminded myself that interest doesn't always translate into immediate sales. After sending a reminder email, things started to change. One person said she's not available on that day. Then one neighbor booked 2 spots, and shortly after, a mom reached out and booked the remaining 3 spots for herself and 2 kids. Just like that, the workshop was fully booked. Holy shit, I was speechless. That was the moment when the pressure really set in because people had paid, and now I had to deliver. I spent the following weeks preparing as much as I could. I sourced tools and materials, made book cloths, prepared paper, printed guides, cleaned my house, asked my cats to cooperate, and practiced my teaching flow. There were still many unknowns, especially around timing and how different people would move through the process. But I moved forward anyway. On the day of the workshop, everyone showed up with a great attitude. I felt a bit nervous at the beginning and stumbled slightly during my introduction, but as the session went on, it felt more natural. I became more focused on helping my students rather than worrying about myself. The group dynamic turned out to be really positive. People naturally talked to each other, made jokes, helped each other, and stayed engaged throughout the process. The kids were especially focused and handled the tools better than I expected. With time, my anxiety faded and was replaced by a sense of purpose. I just wanted each person to enjoy the process and walk away with a book they were proud of. After the workshop ended, I felt a level of fulfillment that was different from anything I had experienced with my online workshop. There was something about being in the same space, seeing people create with their hands, and sharing that experience together that felt deeply meaningful. Looking back, it's surprising to think about how much has changed since 2019. Back then, I had no interest in teaching at all. Now I find myself genuinely excited to improve the experience and host the next workshop and more. This is a big progress I celebrated for and told myself how proud I am of what I did. At the time of writing, I still do many things in my paper business, but I have gained more clarity on what I want to focus on. And I think that's the whole point of following my curiosity, bringing my ideas to life, and narrowing down to things that are meaningful, sustainable, and support my lifestyle. And that's the story of the first in-person workshop I hosted. If you have questions, comments, or similar experience to share, please leave a comment. I would love to read it. Thank you so much for being here. See you next week.